My son sent me an audio message from my in-law's shed. Dad, please come. There's no food. I don't know how many days I'll survive. I dropped everything, took the first flight home. Police were already there when I arrived. A detective walked toward me. Mr. Nelson. Where's my son? She closed her eyes. The boy. He'd been in there for 11 days. Your wife knew. Then what she showed me next. He was 42, lean from hotel gym sessions and too many working dinners. His dark hair starting to silver at then temples. The consulting work paid exceptionally well, enough to fund his son Tommy's college, and then some. But the travel was relentless. His phone buzzed again. A text from his wife Denise. Tommy's fine. Stop worrying. Focus on your work. He hadn't asked about Tommy. That was the thing that bothered him lately. Denise always seemed to know when he was thinking about their 12-year-old son, always ready with reassurance he hadn't requested. They'd been married 14 years together since college, and somewhere in the chaos of his career ascension, the warmth between them had cooled to something transactional. Adrian had grown up in foster care, bouncing between homes until he aged out at 18. He'd clawed his way through state college on scholarships and spite, driven by the promise he'd made to himself. His own family would be different. Stable. Loving. Everything he'd never had. But 3 weeks ago, something had shifted. He'd call home on a Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday morning in Colorado, where Denise and Tommy lived in the house he bought them. Tommy usually answered by the third ring, eager to tell his dad about school or the robotics club he joined. That day, Denise picked up instead. He's my mother's, she'd said, her voice tight. They're bonding. You know how Shalia loves having him around. Adrian had met his mother-in-law, Shalia Shoemaker, exactly 4 times in 14 years. The woman was a bitter piece of work who'd made her disapproval of Adrian clear from day one. Not good. Enough for my daughter, she'd said at their wedding rehearsal, loud enough for Adrian to hear. A foster kid, no family, no breeding. Denise had laughed it off then. Mom's just traditional. She'll come around. She never had. And now Tommy was staying with her. How long has he been there? Adrian had asked. A pause. A few days. Look, I have to go. Love you. The line went dead. He tried calling Tommy's cell. Straight to voicemail. Tried again the next day. Same thing. Denise's explanation shifted. Tommy forgot his charger. The service was spotty as Shalia's property. He was busy with his grandmother. Don't be so paranoid, Adrian. Adrian opened his laptop now, pulling up the work proposal from Seoul, but his mind wandered. He'd built a career on reading people, on identifying patterns in organizational behavior, on seeing what others missed, and every instinct he'd honed told him something was wrong at home. His phone lit up with an email, not the contract from the headhunter. The sender was listed as T, Tommy's initials. Dad, please come. There's no food. I don't know how many days I'll survive. Below the text was an audio file. Adrian's hands went numb. He clicked the file. Tommy's voice emerged, thin and terrified. Dad. It's dark in here. She only opens the door once a day now. Sometimes not even that. I'm in the shed behind Grandma Shalia's house. Please, Dad. I'm scared. My phone's at 2%. I don't think the recording cut off. Adrian was moving before conscious thought caught up. He grabbed his passport, his wallet, left everything else. The hotel room door slammed behind him as he ran for the elevator. In the taxi to the airport, he tried calling Denise. No answer. Tried the local police in Greenfield, Colorado. They put him on hold, then transferred him 3 times before he got someone who'd listen. My son is being held in a shed, he said, fighting to keep his voice level. At 4782 Ridgemont Road. He's 12 years old. He's been there for days. Sir, who's holding him? My mother-in-law, maybe my wife. I don't know. I'm in Singapore. I'm getting on a plane right now. We'll send someone to check it out. What's your son's name? Thomas Harmon. Tommy. The standby ticket to Denver cost $4,000. Adrian didn't blink. He sat in the terminal for 40 minutes waiting for boarding, his leg bouncing, checking his phone every 30 seconds. No new messages from Tommy. The battery was dead, or he was no. Don't think that the flight was 17 hours with one connection. Adrian didn't sleep. He sat rigid in his seat, replaying every interaction with Denise over the past month, every deflection, every time she'd steered him away from talking to Tommy directly. She'd known. The detective's words would echo in his head for years. Your wife knew, but he didn't know that yet. Not while he was suspended over the Pacific Ocean, helpless and 30,000 feet from anything he could do. He landed in Denver at 6:47 a.m. local time, nearly 24 hours after receiving Tommy's message. His phone had died somewhere over the Pacific. He bought a charger at the airport, plugged in at the car rental counter while the attendant processed his license. 7 missed calls from Colorado number, 3 voicemails. The first was from Detective Nicole Howard. Mr. Harmon, this is Greenfield PD. Please call me back regarding the wellness check at Ridgemont Road. It's urgent. The second, same voice, different tone. Mr. Harmon, we've entered the property. We need you to contact us immediately. The third, Mr. Harmon, we've located your son. You need to get here. I'm so sorry. Adrian drove 90 miles per hour on Highway 25, his hands white-knuckled on the wheel. The rental car's GPS said 2 hours to Greenfield. He made it in 90 minutes. 4 police cars were parked outside the rambling farmhouse on Ridgemont Road. An ambulance. A van marked forensics. Adrian's heart stopped. Forensics meant evidence. Evidence meant crimes. Crimes meant he was out of the car before it fully stopped. Running toward the yellow tape cordoning off the property, a uniformed officer stepped in front of him. Sir, you can't. That's my son, Tommy Harmon. I'm Adria Harmon. The officer's expression shifted. He spoke into his radio. Detective Howard, the father's here. A woman emerged from behind the house. Mid-40s, dark hair pulled back, tired eyes that had seen too much. She walked toward Adrian with the careful steps of someone approaching a trauma victim. Mr. Harmon, where's my son? Detective Nicole Howard closed her eyes briefly as if steeling herself. The boy. He'd been in there for 11 days. Your wife knew. She gestured toward the back of the property. Come with me, but I need to prepare you for what you're about to see. The shed was a converted storage building behind the main house, maybe 10 feet by 12, with a single small window covered from the outside with plywood. The door hung open now, revealing shadows within. The smell hit Adrian first. Urine, waste, fear. Medic came out carrying in for bag. Behind him on a stretcher was Tommy. Adrian's son had lost at least 15 lbs. His lips were cracked and bleeding. Dark circles hollowed his eyes, but those eyes found Adrian's, and the relief in them broke something fundamental in Adrian's chest. Dad, Tommy whispered. Adrian pushed past the detective, past the medics, and grabbed his son's hand. I'm here. I'm right here. You're safe now. We need to get him to the hospital, the medic said. He's severely dehydrated, malnourished, possible kidney damage. I'm going with him, sir. Detective Howard started. I said, I'm going with him. In the ambulance, while the medics worked, Tommy gripped Adrian's hand and spoke in fragments. Grandma said it was temporary. Said you didn't want me anymore. That I was too expensive to keep. Mom came twice. She brought water. Said she couldn't take me yet. Said Grandma was teaching me discipline. Adrian felt something cold and final settle into his bones. Did your mother put you in there? Grandma did. But Mom, she knew. Dad, she'd come in and say, I just needed to last a little longer. That you were going to sign the papers. What papers? The ones they gave me to Grandma. For good. At the hospital, they stabilized Tommy, started fluids, ran tests. A social worker appeared, asking gentle questions. Then, Detective Howard returned with a colleague, a grim-faced man who introduced himself as Detective Matt Espinosa. We need to talk, Howard said. Somewhere private. They moved to a family consultation room. Adrian sat, his body vibrating within rage so pure it felt like ice. We found documents. Howard began in Shalia Shoemaker's house, including correspondence with your wife, Denise Harmon. Mr. Harmon, did you know your mother-in-law was trying to get custody of Tommy? No. Did you know she filed for grandparents' rights last year? No. Denise never mentioned it. Espinosa leaned forward. The case was dismissed. No grounds. But, according to the emails we found, Mrs. Shoemaker and your wife hatched a different plan. They were going to claim you'd abandoned the family. You've been overseas for work for 18 months. Correct. Yes. They claimed Tommy was being neglected in your absence. That your wife couldn't handle him alone. They'd arranged for Tommy to stay with Mrs. Shoemaker temporarily, but Tommy didn't cooperate. He kept calling you, kept refusing to go along with the narrative they were building. So, Shalia locked him in shed. Adrian's voice came out flat. And Denise, your wife visited at least 6 times that we can verify. She brought minimal food and water. Never called police. Never took Tommy home. Mr. Harmon, we're charging them both with child abuse, false imprisonment, and conspiracy. We're looking at child endangerment causing severe harm. Shalia Shoemaker will likely face attempted murder charges. Where's my wife now? In custody. She was at the property when we arrived. She tried to claim she didn't know Tommy was in the shed, but we have the emails. We have Tommy's testimony. We have security footage from the property showing her entering and leaving the shed. Adrian stood. I want to see her. Mr. Harmon, I want to see my wife. They wouldn't let him in the interrogation room, but they let him watch through the one-way glass. Denise sat at a metal table, her blonde hair disheveled, mascara smeared under her eyes. She looked smaller than he remembered, diminished somehow. She was crying. Real tears, probably. Denise had always been good at crying. Detective Howard entered the room, sat across from her. Mrs. Harmon, let's go through this again. When did you first know your son was in a shed? I didn't know. Denise sobbed. I thought he was just staying at my mother's. I had no idea she'd locked him up. We have emails between you and your mother discussing the shed solution. Your words. Denise's face crumpled. You don't understand. Adrian was never home. He chose his career over us, over Tommy. My mother said this was the only way to show the courts he wasn't fit to be a father. That Tommy would be better off with family who actually cared. So, you let your mother starve your child to prove a point? No, I brought him food. She stopped realizing the admission. You brought him food to the shed where he was locked up for 11 days. Denise's lawyer, a public defender who looked fresh out of law school, put a hand on her arm. Don't say anything else. But Denise wasn't looking at the lawyer. She was looking at the mirror as if she could see through it. Adrian, she said to her own reflection, if you're there, you have to understand. Your mother poisoned you against me. She never thought I was good enough. This was supposed to fix things. We could have Tommy, just the 3 of us, and you could stop traveling so much. You could be a real father. Adrian watched his wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, justify attempted murder through tears and delusion, and he felt nothing. The woman he'd married, the mother of his child, was a stranger. Had always been a stranger. He turned away from the glass. I need to get back to Tommy. Detective Howard followed him out. Mr. Harmon, we'll need your full statement. And there's something else. Adrian waited. We're still processing the shed. What we found. She paused, choosing words carefully. There's evidence this wasn't the first time Shalia Shoemaker has done something like this. We found a journal. References to fixing her daughter, your wife, when she was young. Similar methods. We're looking into it. So Denise had grown up in that shed or something like it. Learned cruelty at her mother's knee. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it explained the shape of the monster. How long will they go to prison? Adrian asked. That's for the courts to decide, but with the evidence we have, Shalia Shoemaker is looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. Your wife is an accessory who aided and abetted 8 to 12 years, maybe more. Depends on what else we uncover. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. But Adrian nodded, shook the detective's hand, and walked back to his son's hospital room. Tommy was awake, and 4 in each arm, monitors beeping softly. He looked so small in the hospital bed. Dad, I'm here, buddy. Did you see Mom? Adrian pulled a chair close, took his son's hand. Yeah, I saw her. Is she going to jail? Yes. Tommy's eyes filled with tears. Good. I hate her, Dad. Is that bad? Adrian squeezed his hand. No, Tommy. That's not bad at all. That night, while his son slept under hospital supervision, Adrian sat in the parking lot of his rental car and made a series of phone calls. First to his company, resigning effective immediately. Then to a real estate agent about selling the Colorado house. Then to a lawyer about filing for divorce and full custody. The last call was to a number he'd kept in his contact for years but never used. A former client from his consulting days who'd gone into private investigation after retiring from a 3-letter agency. Vince, Adrian said when the man answered. It's Adrian Harmon. Remember that favor you said you owed me? Of course. What do you need? Everything there is to find on Shalia Shoemaker and her entire family. I want bank records, property deeds, medical histories, every skeleton in every closet. And I need it quietly. A pause. How quiet? Invisible. You got it. How much time do I have? Adrian watched the hospital windows where his son lay. Healing. However long it takes. I'm not in a hurry, but I want to know everything because the courts would give Shalia and Denise prison time. That was justice in a legal sense. But Adrian Harmon had been planning revenge since he was 9 years old, sitting in his fourth foster home, listening to his foster father explain that sometimes the system failed people, that sometimes you had to be your own justice. He'd waited 33 years to have a family worth protecting. Now he'd wait as long as it took to make sure the people who had hurt his son understood the full weight of their mistake. The next morning, Tommy was moved to a private room. His color was better. The 4 fluids working to restore what 11 days of near starvation had stolen. A child psychologist came and went. Social services interviewed Adrian for 2 hours asking about his finances, his plans, his ability to care for Tommy going forward. I'm taking a permanent position in Denver, Adrian told them, fully remote work, consulting from home. Tommy will have full-time care and access to the best therapists money can buy. It was true. He'd already accepted an offer from a Denver-based firm that had been courting him for months. The salary was less than his international work, but he didn't need that much money anymore. He needed to be present. By day 3, Tommy was clear to leave the hospital. The media had caught wind of the story. Local woman charged with imprisoning grandson, and reporters camped outside the hospital. Adrian arranged a back exit, carried Tommy to the rental car himself, and drove them to an extended stay hotel while he figured out permanent housing. That evening, his phone rang. "Vince, you're not going to believe what I found," the investigator said. "Your mother-in-law is a piece of work. 3 bankruptcies, a history of insurance fraud. But here's the interesting part. She's been collecting disability payments for a back injury for 12 years. Except she doesn't have a back injury. I've got photos of her hauling 50 lb feed bags last month. That's fraud. Gets better. The disability claim was related to a car accident that never happened. She falsified police reports, medical records, the works, and your wife knew about it. I found emails where Denise was helping her mother manage the accounts." Adrian processed this. What else? Shalia's property is mortgaged to hell. She owes $340,000 on a house worth maybe $180,000. She's 3 months behind on payments. Foreclosure notices started last week. And get this, she took out a life insurance policy on Tommy 6 months ago. $500,000. She's listed as the beneficiary. Adrian's blood went cold. She was going to let him die in that shed. Or worse, the policy has an accident clause, double payout. So, it hadn't been about custody at all, or not entirely. Shalia Shoemaker had been planning to murder his son for insurance money. "Vince, I need more. I need everything you can find on anyone connected to her. Family, friends, anyone who might have known about this. I'm on it. But Adrian, whatever you're planning, be careful. These people are already going to prison. Don't give them company." Adrian hung up and looked at Tommy asleep in the next bed, his small body finally at peace. The boy had nightmares every night, waking up screaming that he couldn't breathe, that the walls were closing in. The psychologist said it would take years to undo the damage. Prison wasn't enough, not nearly enough. But Adrian was patient, and he learned long ago that the best revenge wasn't quick. It was thorough. Over the next week he moved Tommy into a rental house in a quiet Denver suburb, enrolled him in a new school, and set up therapy sessions 3 times a week. He hired a tutor to help Tommy catch up on the schoolwork he'd missed. He cooked meals, read bedtime stories, and held his son during the nightmares. He also built a file. Vince's information was just the start. Adrian began his own investigation, using the skills he'd honed in corporate consulting to map out the Shoemaker family network. Shalia had a sister, Viola Rubio, who lived in New Mexico. 2 adult children besides Denise, a son named Dennis Shoemaker, who worked construction in Wyoming, and another daughter, Lena Santos, who managed a restaurant in Boulder. Adrian made it his business to learn everything about them. Where they banked, where they shopped, who they owed money to, what secrets they kept. He discovered that Dennis Shoemaker had a gambling problem, and owed money to some very unpleasant people in Cheyenne. That Lena Santos had been stealing from a restaurant till for 2 years, embezzling nearly $80,000 to fund a cocaine habit. He learned that Viola Rubio, Shalia's sister, had known about the shed, had visited during Tommy's imprisonment and said nothing. Adrian documented it all. Then he waited. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks after Tommy's rescue. Adrian sat in the courtroom gallery and watched as Shalia Shoemaker and Denise Harmon were arraigned. Both pleaded not guilty. Their lawyers argued for bail reduction. Shalia was an elderly woman with health problems. Denise was a mother separated from her child. The judge wasn't buying it. These defendants are charged with child endangerment causing severe harm, false imprisonment, and conspiracy. The evidence is overwhelming. Bail is set at $500,000 each. Neither could make bail. They'd sit in jail until trial. Good. After the hearing, Adrian approached the prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Christy Fleming, who'd been assigned the case. "Miss Fleming, can we talk?" They met in a coffee shop near the courthouse. Adrian laid out everything Vince had found. The disability fraud, the insurance policy, all of it. Fleming's eyes widened. "This changes the case. We can add attempted murder charges. Financial motive premeditation. Mr. Harmon, are you sure you want this to go public? It's going to make the trial much longer, more painful for Tommy. I want them to face everything they've done." Adrian said, "Every charge, every consequence. Then I'll need copies of all this documentation." Adrian handed her a thumb drive. "It's all there, authenticated, documented, ready for court." Fleming smiled, a predatory expression. "Mr. Harmon, I think we're going to get along just fine." The trial was set for 4 months out. In the meantime, Adrian had work to do. He started with Dennis Shoemaker. A few anonymous calls to Dennis's creditors, pointing them toward his current location, suggesting that Dennis might be planning to skip town. The gambling debts came due with interest, and the men who came to collect weren't gentle. Dennis ended up in the hospital with 2 broken legs, and a newfound willingness to cooperate with authorities about anything and everything his mother had ever done. Next was Lena Santos. Adrian compiled evidence of her embezzlement and sent it to the restaurant owners, along with security footage Vince had obtained. Lena was fired, arrested, and charged. Facing prison time herself, she started talking about her mother's long history of abuse and manipulation, about how Shalia had trained all her children to lie, steal, and cover for each other. Viola Rubio proved more interesting. The aunt had money, old money from a deceased husband's oil investments. Adrian dug into her finances and found that she'd been funding Shalia's lifestyle for years. He also found that Viola had a great-nephew, Shalia's grandson from a previous marriage, who'd been institutionalized 20 years ago, after a mysterious accident at Shalia's property. Adrian tracked down the great-nephew, now in his 32nd, living in a care facility in Arizona. The man had brain damage from oxygen deprivation. The official story was that he nearly drowned in a pond, but his medical records, which Adrian obtained through Vince's contacts, told a different story. The pattern of injuries was consistent with suffocation, not drowning. Adrian took this information to Detective Howard. "I think Shalia Shoemaker has done this before." Howard examined the files. "Jesus. How do we miss this? Different jurisdiction, different name." This was before Shalia married her second husband, and Viola Rubio paid off the local authorities to make it go away. "Can you prove that?" "I have bank records showing large cash withdrawals for Viola's accounts, corresponding to deposits in the personal accounts of 2 police officers who are now retired. I have the great-nephew's testimony. He's impaired, but he can still communicate. He says his grandmother locked him in a closet for days at a time." Howard made some calls. Within a week, Viola Rubio was under investigation for obstruction of justice and accessory. After the fact, the retired cops were looking at their own charges. The Shoemaker family empire was crumbling, and Adrian was orchestrating the fall with the precision of a corporate takeover. He'd spent his career identifying weak points in organizational structures. Now, he was applying those skills to destruction instead of reconstruction, but still, wasn't enough because Shalia and Denise were going to prison regardless. Their co-conspirators were facing charges. The family was in ruins. What Adrian wanted was something more personal, more permanent. He wanted them to understand what Tommy had felt in that shed, the fear, the helplessness, the betrayal. He wanted them to suffer in ways that transcended legal punishment. And he was patient enough to wait for the perfect opportunity. It came during the trial itself for months after Tommy's rescue. Adrian sat in the gallery every day, watching as the prosecution laid out its case. Medical experts testified about Tommy's condition. The boy himself took the stand, his voice small but steady as he described his 11 days in the dark. Denise wept throughout Tommy's testimony. Shalia sat stone-faced, showing nothing. The defense tried to claim that Shalia had mental health issues, that Denise had been manipulated by her abusive mother. They painted a picture of two troubled women who'd made a terrible mistake. But the evidence was overwhelming. The emails, the insurance policy, the disability fraud, the history of abuse stretching back decades. On the 8th day of trial during a recess, Adrian received a call from Vince. "I found something else." The investigator said Shalia Shoemaker's first husband, Dennis Sr., father of her oldest kids, died under suspicious circumstances 35 years ago. It was ruled a heart attack, but I talked to the pathologist who handled the autopsy. He said there were inconsistencies that bothered him at the time, but he was pressured to sign off on natural causes. Pressure by who? Same cops that Viola paid off for the great-nephew incident. Adrian, I think Shalia might have killed her first husband. And I think there might be others. Adrian felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't just about Tommy anymore. This was about stopping a serial abuser who'd been operating for decades with impunity. "Give me everything," he said. "Every death connected to her. Every suspicious incident. I don't care how old the cases are." It took Vince 2 weeks working around the clock, but what he found was staggering. 5 deaths over 35 years. All connected to Shalia Shoemaker or her immediate family. The first husband, a neighbor who'd complained about Shalia's treatment of her children. A social worker who'd started asking questions. Viola's husband, whose accidental fall down the stairs had netted Viola a $2 million insurance payout. And most damning, Denise's younger sister, who died at age 7 from what was ruled sudden infant death syndrome. Except SIDS didn't affect 7-year-olds. Adrian brought all of it to Detective Howard and Prosecutor Fleming. They expanded the investigation, exhumed bodies, reopened cold cases. By the time the jury returned to deliberate, Shalia Shoemaker was facing 5 additional murder charges. Denise was charged as an accessory in her father's death. She'd been 12 at the time and had helped clean up the crime scene. The trial had consumed 6 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Shalia Shoemaker received 5 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. Denise received 40 years with a possibility of parole after 25. Adrian sat in the courtroom as the sentences were read and felt nothing, no satisfaction, no closure, just a cold, empty space where his marriage used to be. Tommy was in therapy 5 days a week now. He gained back the weight, physically healed. But he still slept with a nightlight, still panicked in small spaces, still flinched when Adrian had to leave for more than a few hours. The legal justice was done. Shalia would die in prison. Denise would spend the prime of her life behind bars. But Adrian's plan was just beginning because he'd learned something important during the investigation. Shalia Shoemaker's greatest fear wasn't prison. It was irrelevance. Being forgotten, having her legacy erased. She'd spent decades building a family empire. Controlling her children and grandchildren through fear and manipulation. Positioning herself as the matriarch of a powerful clan. Adrian was going to systematically dismantle every piece of that empire, and he was going to make sure she knew about it. He started by legally changing Tommy's name. Thomas Shoemaker Harmon became simply Thomas Harmon. No connection to the Shoemaker line. Then he worked with Dennis Shoemaker, who turned state's evidence against his mother. Dennis legally changed his name, relocated to Oregon, and cut all ties with the family. Adrian helped him financially, set him up with a new job through his consulting contacts. In return, Dennis gave interviews about his mother's abuse, destroying any remaining public sympathy for her. Lena Santos, facing her own prison time for embezzlement, made a deal with prosecutors. She testified about her mother's pattern of abuse and manipulation. In exchange, she received probation and mandatory therapy. Adrian helped her get into a good treatment program and set up a payment plan for her restitution. She too changed her name and disappeared from Shalia's orbit. Viola Rubio was convicted of obstruction and accessory charges. She received 10 years but was out on bail pending appeal. Adrian made sure her great-nephew's story became public. The oil money dried up fast when Viola's lawyers drained her accounts and her social circle. Wealthy donors and society matrons turned their backs on her. She died alone in a nursing home 18 months after Shalia's conviction, broke and forgotten. The Shoemaker property on Ridgemont Road, the house where Tommy had been imprisoned, was seized by the state as proceeds of crime. Adrian made an anonymous bid through a shell corporation, and bought it for pennies on the dollar at auction. Then he burned it down. Not literally. That would be illegal. But he hired a demolition company, had the shed dismantled first and the pieces buried in a landfill. Then the house itself was torn down, the land excavated and remediated. He planted it over with native grasses and wild flowers, and donated the property to the county as a nature preserve. Every trace of Shalia Shoemaker's domain was erased from the earth. In prison, Shalia received regular updates about the destruction of her legacy. Adrian made sure of it. Anonymous letters, newspaper clippings about her children changing their names, photos of the empty lot where her house used to stand. Every week, a new reminder that everything she'd built was gone. She tried to respond at first, sending letters through her lawyer demanding Adrian stop, then threatening letters, then desperate pleas to see Denise, to have some contact with family. Adrian ignored them all. Denise in her prison tried to write to Tommy. Long letters apologizing, explaining, begging for understanding. The prison therapist suggested that Tommy might benefit from reading them. Tommy read one, then he handed it to Adrian. "I don't want any more of these." Adrian made sure the prison knew no more letters, no contact, no visits. Denise would spend the next 25 years knowing her son had rejected her completely. 5 years after the trial, Adrian sat in a Denver coffee shop with Detective Nicole Howard, who'd become something like a friend through the ordeal. "You know," Howard said, "I've been in law enforcement for 23 years, I've seen a lot of victims. Most of them just want to move on, forget it ever happened, but you went to war." Adrian sipped his coffee. "I want to make sure they could never hurt anyone again. You did more than that. The cold cases we reopened because of your investigation. We've solved 6 murders, prevented who knows how many future victims. The disability fraud case led to a whole ring of fake claims. You didn't just get justice for Tommy. You got it for a lot of people." "How's Tommy doing?" Howard asked. "Good. Better. He's starting high school next year. Wants to study engineering. He's got friends now. Doing normal teenage stuff." Adrian smiled. "Last week he told me he was glad. I'm his dad." First time he said that since everything. Howard nodded. "And you? How are you?" Adrian, consider the question. He'd spent 5 years dismantling the Shoemaker family, erasing their legacy, ensuring their suffering matched the suffering they'd inflicted. He'd crossed legal lines and moral boundaries. He'd become someone his younger self wouldn't recognize. But his son was safe. His son was healing. His son had a future. "I'm good," Adrian said. And he meant it. The last piece of his plan came together on the 10th anniversary of Tommy's rescue. Tommy was now 22. A senior at MIT studying robotics. He'd grown into a confident young man, lean and tall like his father, with the kind of quiet strength that came from surviving the unsurvivable. They talked about what happened over the years. Tommy knew what Adrian had done. Not all of it, but enough. He knew his father had systematically destroyed the people who had hurt him. "Do you think it was wrong?" Tommy asked once during his freshman year, "what you did to them?" Adrian had considered lying, giving some platitude about how revenge was never the answer. But Tommy deserved honesty. "I think it was necessary." Adrian said the legal system gave them prison. "I gave them something worse. The knowledge that every single thing they cared about was gone. That their cruelty had consequences beyond bars and cells." Tommy had nodded, thinking it over. "Good." Now, on the 10th anniversary, Adrian received a letter. It came through his lawyer. A final communication from Shalia Shoemaker. She was dying cancer. She had maybe 3 months left. She wanted to see Tommy one last time to apologize, to explain. Adrian read the letter, then handed it to Tommy, who was home from school for the weekend. Tommy read it twice. Then he looked up at his father. "What do you think I should do?" "I think you should do whatever feels right for you. Not for her. Not for me. For you." Tommy sat with that for a long time. Finally he said, "I don't need her apology. I don't need to understand why she did it. I already know she's a monster. Monsters don't need complex motivations." He folded the letter. "Tell her no." Adrian did. The letter he sent back was simple. "Tommy has no interest in seeing you. He's requested that you never contact him or anyone associated with him again. You will die alone as you deserve." Shalia Shoemaker died 6 weeks later in the prison infirmary. No family present, no funeral. Her body was cremated and the ashes scattered in an unmarked location. Denise, still in prison, would spend the next 15 years knowing her mother had died alone and unmourned. She'd be eligible for parole when she was 63. Adrian had already prepared legal documentation, ensuring she could never contact Tommy or any grandchildren he might someday have. The shoemaker name existed now only in court records and criminal databases. Every person who'd carried it had either changed their name or died. The family line was broken, the legacy erased. Adrian stood at Tommy's college graduation that spring and watched his son walk across the stage to accept his degree. Tommy had graduated with honors, had a job lined up at a robotics company in California, had a girlfriend he was serious about. He'd survived. More than survived, he'd thrived. That night over dinner, Tommy raised a glass. To my dad, the best father anyone could ask for. Adrian clink-ticked his glass against his son's. To you, Tommy, for being stronger than anyone should have to be. They drank, and Adrian felt something he hadn't felt in 10 years. Peace. The revenge was complete. The monsters were destroyed. His son was safe and whole and happy. In the end, that was all that mattered. Later that night, back in his Denver apartment, Adrian burned the files. Every document Vince had gathered, every piece of evidence he'd compiled that wasn't part of the official record, every plan and strategy and contingency. He watched the papers curl and blacken in his fireplace, and thought about the man he'd been before all this. The ambitious consultant who thought career success was the measure of a life well lived. That man had been a fool. This man, the one who'd gone to war for his child and won, knew better. Success wasn't measured in promotions or paychecks or international contracts. It was measured in the people you protected, the battles you fought, the love you gave to those who deserved it, and the vengeance you delivered to those who didn't. Adrian Harmon had lost his wife, his old career, and years of his life to this fight. But he gained something infinitely more valuable. His son's future bought and paid for with the complete annihilation of everyone who tried to steal it. As the last of the documents turned to ash, Adrian smiled. It had been worth every second. And there you have it.